YouTube, what's going on? Racing Chemical here. Welcome back to F1 2020 My Team Career Mode with the Chemical Racing Formula One team. We are here for round 5 in Canada, and we are about to be on our first flying lap here. And I believe Jack Aiken's actually right in front of us. So we are having more wear and tear on different components of the car. So performance, I already feel, is going to be lacking going into round 5 here in Canada, which is not good. And that's exactly why, like I said, durability is going to be my main focus in F1 2021 for the start of our first season or two, to make sure that we don't have components failing or wearing as much as they have been. And as you can see how much faster Jack even appears to be than us even on this qualifying lap. But like I said, Jack has been doing much better than us this season in that car, but out of the first 4 rounds of the season, he's DNF'd 3 out of those 4 rounds. I think he's only finished 1 race, and I got a little bit onto that curb too much, went into the wall, and that is arguably, I should say, and obviously, the worst place on the track for me, because I always end up doing something like that. I get on the curb too much, or I go through there too quick. We hit the wall again, and this just goes to show you how not comfortable I feel with the vehicle at this point in time, on top of the issues that we are now getting again with the wear and tear on components. The downforce packages are failing through development, so it's not been a good week overall. We're going to go out for another lap here soon, but that is not a good start here to the qualifying session for Canada. So here we are again on our last flying lap here, halfway through it. We actually did one prior, and we still could only get to P22. We get through this section a lot better that time, and like I said, it's still something I have to really improve and work on because it's, like I said, my worst area on this circuit. So we dropped, I believe, about, what does this say? I mean, less than a tenth there. But again, vehicle not feeling good, components getting more worn. The downforce package didn't feel exactly how I wanted it to. I gotta say, the car felt much better in Azerbaijan, ironically, before we got here to Canada. Obviously with these long straights, we are definitely going to be lacking in the top end speed department. And like I said, we ended up just pretty much staying P22, and we're gonna fast forward through the rest of this session. And I don't know what's happening on the screen. I've never seen them spaz out like that before. So as we get to the end of qualifying here, we unfortunately stay P22, but our teammate Jack Aiken does a very good job and actually gets P14, I think the highest qualifying session we've had all season long. So if he runs a good race and doesn't get a DNF, he has a chance and potential to get us our first points finish, hopefully. We'll have to see how it goes. Let's go ahead and take it to David Crofty for the grid here for round 5 in Canada.
Bonjour, it's time once again to go racing here in Montreal, the second largest French-speaking city in the world, and home since 1978 to the Canadian Grand Prix. It's one of the fastest races of the season here at the Circuit Gilles Villeneuve, with around 60% of this 2.7-mile circuit taken at full throttle. There are 14 corners to navigate, the very last of which has its very own infamous history and could be the cause of a safety car today. And as always, a man with plenty of racing experience joins me in the commentary box. Today it's Anthony Davidson. Tell me, Ant, you're no stranger to surviving the melee of turn 1. So how do you keep out of trouble when there's so much going on around you?
Well, the throttle goes both ways, Crofty. You've got to have the discipline not to try and win the race on the first lap. So always be prepared to lift early and give those around you more space. Trying to be the last of the late breakers with half a dozen cars around you may pay off from time to time, but it's also a great way to lose your front wing.
Let's run you through the driver grid order for today's exciting race. An immense lap from Lewis Hamilton yesterday puts him on pole position, and it's Valtteri Bottas that completes the front row. Looking down the rest of the grid, we have Verstappen, Perez, Lance Stroll and Ricciardo, Leclerc, Ocon, Sainz and Lando Norris. Gasly, Vettel, they've taken a grid penalty. Jack Aitken and Raikkonen, Giovinazzi, Magnussen, Romain Grosjean and Daniel Kvyat. Latifi, Russell, Edwards and Alexander Albon picks up the last spot on the grid. It's almost time for the lights to go out, so let's head down to the track and get this Grand Prix underway.
All right, now time for our race strategy here. Obviously 2 stoppers required. at this circuit. So we're going to start off, I believe, on the softs and then try to do additional 2 stints on the medium, because again, if we were to go to the hards, we already don't have the pace as it is, so we need to try to give ourselves the best chance at being able to compete with the rest of the field. And obviously we're going to start P21 here because Alex Albon had some sort of issue that required him to drop down in the grid. Nonetheless, like I said, we're starting on the softs, which is pretty much what everybody else is doing ahead of us as well. So we'll all be on the softs, at least P22 through whatever it is. And like I said, we're going to try to see, as you can see, just how worn some of those components are, which is also why we have a lack of power and we're not going to be, really competitive. Under different circumstances, with a much better vehicle, a much more durable vehicle with, the speed that I can rely on, I would opt to go on a harder compound tire and obviously extend our stint if possible. But because, like I said, we don't have the luxury to being able to be in a vehicle like that, we're going to have to do our best in this car, start on the softs and see if we can gain a couple of positions and try to hold on to those throughout this race to the best of our ability. It's really the only way we'll have a chance of getting any points. But let's go ahead and go to the grid and wait for 5 red lights to begin round 5. So now as we get back to the grid here, and we are going to be awaiting 5 red lights. Starting on the soft compound tires, we're going to see exactly what happens. Like I said, the vehicle is not feeling as good as it did in the first couple of laps of Azerbaijan, but nonetheless, we are underway here. Wheel spin for Russell and Latifi ahead of us, and as you can see, we already seem to be kind of on the back end of just raw power, but we're going to go ahead for a dive on the inside, try to gain a couple of positions. We find ourselves up into P18, I believe, and that's about as best as we could do here. I already feel a lack of power, and this was really kind of disappointing for me. Nonetheless, we are, like I said, 3 positions ahead, but I still feel like every corner we are in a position where it seems like somebody can go past us at any second. So we're able to get past Roman Grosjean, and get up into P17. Kind of another late dive, but we kept it clean, minimal contact if any. And this is my worst area on the track, so I have to take it carefully through here, and I let off the throttle just a little bit, and we were able to get through there without sending ourselves into the wall like we did in the qualifying session that we had earlier. So nonetheless, we somehow are in P17. I don't know how. Like I said, I can already feel a loss of just power, despite the fact that we're able to keep up. And the only reason why I'm able to do this on the first lap is because I'm using overtake. If we're at a later stage in the race, I'm not going to have the speed and or power to keep up with Antonio Giovinazzi ahead of us and the rest of the cars on this grid. But nonetheless, we're in P17. We've created a little bit of gap back to Roman Grosjean, so I have no complaints thus far. And to be honest, this race was kind of a blur. I know we didn't end up doing too well. I can't recall too much of it. Nonetheless, though, a decent start. We're in P17. We're going to fast forward through and see what else happens here. So recall how I said there's a section of this circuit that I absolutely suck at. Well, here it is again. You guys saw it in qualifying. You're going to see it again. Snap oversteer as we get on the curb, and that sends us for a spin. And we already lost all those spots that, let's be honest, we had to work really hard to maintain. We got up to P17. We were doing well, staying in P17. Now we lost all those spots, and because this vehicle is just so underwhelming, it is going to take a miracle to get back at trying to gain any additional positions. We do not have any wear, I believe, on the wing. I don't think we actually suffered any damage, just a typical spin. But nonetheless, we lost 5 spots. Like I said, those spots that we worked really hard to try to maintain for those first couple of laps, and unfortunately our race pretty much went downhill from there. Again, we have such an underperforming car, we can't really afford to make any mistakes. Now if something happens to us that's outside of our control, that's one thing, but if I'm making errors like that, driver errors like that, it essentially puts our race kind of at an end, so to speak. Even if something crazy happens at a later point, the likelihood of us getting back to P17 or higher than that is going to be extremely unlikely. And like I said, I was really frustrated. That was an unforced error. That area, again, I suck at miserably, and it seems like the only way I can get through it sometimes is if I literally crawl through it. I let off the throttle so much and I barely tap it. I just kind of coast through, and almost did the same thing. I'm getting on the throttle too easy, and then I'm getting on those curves as well, and based off of how my car setup is, that puts us in a very vulnerable position to spin out the way we did a lap ago. So unfortunately, that kind of did ruin our race for the most part. I think somebody else ends up like DNFing in this race. I don't recall if it's Jack. I think maybe Jack actually finishes this one, but we're going to fast forward through to see if anything else special happens, as Pierre Gasly just pops up as out of the race, and for whatever reason has completely cut that corner. I have no idea why, whether or not it was just frustration or whether or not I was distracted with something and could not react in time, but we got a warning for that, so we're gonna have to be careful. And as you can see, I'm really trying to put more pressure on the brakes and just try to get into that turn a lot easier, and still the downforce is not where it needs to be. More oversteer. This is a reoccurring issue I had for this race. Then we hit the wall. I'm pretty sure we actually got wing damage there, and a little bit, nothing significant that should warrant us to come in for an early pit stop. But still, like I said, our race was pretty much over at lap 5 when I span out, and the momentum went downhill from there. And this was an extremely long race, like I said, because I was essentially battling with myself the entire time, and it was no fun. So again, another error on my behalf that causes us to not have another great performance. So we had pretty much fast forwarded all the way to the end of this race. I believe we were a lap or 2 laps down, I think, because we suffered even more wing damage. Like I said, I was just so frustrated, I kind of just lost my cool just because we were at the back. And like I said, those driver errors, really weighed in on me. I'm my own worst critic. I'm the hardest on myself than anybody else could be. So I was really just disappointed in my overall performance. Fortunately, didn't have to do the last 2 laps because, again, we were already down. And we ended up finishing P20. And again, another bad performance for us. I think Jack Aiken actually ends up finishing this race. We'll see where he finishes. Driver of the day is Alexander Albon, and I think he deserved that. He started at the back of the grid in P22. I don't recall exactly what position he ended up finishing in, but nonetheless, if he was able to get closer towards the top 10, I think that's a pretty good performance considering how far back that he was. So Lewis Hamilton ends up getting the win here in Canada. I believe it's a Mercedes 1-2 with Max Verstappen on the podium. We've seen that too much. Fortunately, this year in reality, in 2021, it has finally switched up a bit from the typical ham-bot podium. But like I said, it's another bad performance for us, unfortunately. I was really disappointed with how I handled the race in the beginning stages, considering the work I made. And Jack Aiken actually ends up finishing 12th, so just 2 positions away from finishing in the points. Remember, he qualified P14, so I was really happy with Jack this weekend. His first race, I think, since week 1 where he actually does not get a DNF, and he finishes 2 places off of the points. So really proud of Jack and his performance. We'll be going into round 6 in France, and that should be interesting. We're going to get some new components for the vehicle, see if that improves our performance. Us, Alfa Romeo, and Williams are only teams without any points, so we're going to try to change that going into round 6. As always, appreciate you guys' love and support on the channel. I'll go ahead and show you guys the highlights here for a second, and that'll take it to the end of this video. So as I said, we're going to go ahead and just kind of take you guys through the highlights right quick. And yeah, it was just another disappointing week. What I thought was going to be potentially promising, at least in the beginning stages. Like I said, all the way up to lap 5, we were still in pretty much P17. So to at least have finished a couple of spots ahead of where we started and ahead of a couple of cars on the grid that didn't just DNF, that would have been a great confidence booster for me heading into round 6. But that did not stay like that. It was not the case, unfortunately. And like I said, despite the fact that the car definitely felt very underwhelming, somehow I was able to keep it together until, you know, things like this started to happen very regularly, and we found ourselves at the back of the field racing ourselves, which has kind of become a common theme for this season. And like I said, it's just really frustrating. It's so boring to be back there by yourself. I mean, at least if you're racing somebody, it doesn't matter if it's for P20 or P21, at least you're racing. But when you're out there and you're just driving by yourself and it just seems like nobody else is around you, it's not exciting at all. So I feel for drivers in reality that are usually at the back of the grid and they're not really fighting anybody or racing against anybody. I can only imagine just kind of how long the races must feel when you're in that position. So now at this point in the race, I can't recall if this was, I think that was for position, if I'm not mistaken. I don't think we were actually a lap down at this point. And I believe we were fighting Grosjean, and we ended up getting off track a little bit as usual. And there's another spin, and this was a reoccurring theme. I totally forgot that one happened. That was a separate spin that happened, not even the main one that put us 5 positions back, I believe. So it was a lot of that this race, and again, the car didn't feel as stable as I thought it would have initially. Felt much more stable in Baku for whatever reason. I did change my setup a little bit, so probably whatever setup I used for this race was not the best one to go ahead with. Gotta admit, the car looks nice with a couple of the sponsors and whatnot, but yeah, we look nice to be finishing in last place. That's not too much of anything good. And as you can see, smoke coming from the back of our car, which I actually didn't pay attention to until literally that replay just now. So that just goes to show you how bad the car is with the durability and the components being worn, and that obviously has become a real nuisance for us. And like I said, going into round 6, we're gonna have to replace even more components, and hopefully they will be replaced. France is actually one of my favorite circuits as long as I'm really in the zone and I have the right setup. It's not a whole lot of places for error, I think. If anything, worrying about track limits to me is about the only thing. As far as any major crashes or incidents, outside of turn 1, you really shouldn't encounter any of that on any other part of the track. So I'm hoping that France will be much better for us. Like I said, the new components on the car. These street circuits have really been messing with me. I mean, we had Australia, we had Baku, we had France, which I guess, would you really consider it a street circuit? I'm not sure, but these circuits with these really tight spaces where there's not a whole lot of room for overtaking or not a whole lot of room for error in general. These have not been working out good for me considering where our vehicle is at. France, much more open, not a street circuit like the others we've dealt with this season. So I'm hoping and expecting we'll have a much better performance. Again, that will do it for this video. Appreciate you guys' support, but until next time, Racing Chemicals signing out. Have a great and fantastic day. See you and goodbye.